Hi friends, I'm Les Mood, your host. Welcome to the Destination for Innovation series, brought to you by the City of Bakersfield and Green Tech Network. We're in Las Vegas, and we are at the RE Plus convention. We're with a special guest, Andy Atherton from Solestial Energy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Andy, could you share a little bit about yourself and maybe something your colleagues or associates or the world doesn't know about you?
Sure. Grew up in New Hampshire. I've been in the Bay Area now for more than 30 years. Actually, just less than 30 years. Just less than 30 years. I came out in 94 after college. People don't know about me. I had a professional blackjack card counting team in my 20s. And so I might play some cards here later after we're done.
Okay, so I'm going to ride along with you and get to read some of that magic. Where, besides the blackjack and that, where did your journey begin in your career? Where would you point back to?
Sure. I mean, you could start back a bunch of different places. I got an engineering degree at MIT, so mechanical engineer by training. I haven't used it. I've been a business guy since I left college, but I guess the common thread for Solestial that goes back to the beginning is I've always been fascinated by startups. So I've been a founder at 2 startups myself, early exec at a third. This is my 4th very early stage startup, and I'm fascinated by the process. They've all been in different domains, but I just love the stage. I love the energy. I love solving new problems. It's exciting.
So you've been a part of a lot of startups and a career, a lot of experience. Where would you say, or what are you doing these days at Solestial? Your background in energy, you're COO now. What does that look like on a day-to-day?
So Solestial is the solar energy company for space. In the short term, that means we build solar panels for spacecraft. But in the long term, as human endeavor in space grows, we're talking about large-scale energy infrastructure projects. So we mean that, solar energy company for space. It's not just about the panels. My job really is, I'm not the scientist. Again, I've been a business guy for a long time now. I understand the stuff, I can follow along, but I'm not driving the innovation. I'm driving the infrastructure of the company. So I'm helping Stan and Mikhail, the 2 technical co-founders, who are deep experts in this stuff, build a company around the technology that they've developed.
Speaking of building companies, and you've been a part of a lot, what are some struggles that you might be able to point to, maybe some associated triumphs that people could learn from?
There's a million stories. First couple that come to mind, people are super important. People are the heart of it. I would not have joined this company if I spent months as a consultant working with Stan and Mikhail, getting to know each other, getting a feel for the working relationship, so that the quality of the people and the interpersonal interactions are critical for a startup to work. The other thing so that's a common theme. One thing that's different is my previous startups, demand has always been the problem. So, I've been working in software. This is my first actual, atoms versus bits endeavor. With software, you can build anything you want. The problem is, at least in my experience, has been getting the dogs to eat the dog food, right? Getting folks to go through a business process change to realize the value that you see in your vision. So demand has been the problem. At Solestial, it's exactly the opposite. The fish are jumping in the boat. We have tremendous demand for our product, but we need to scale up production. And we're very capacity constrained right now. And we're starting to ship more. There's a bunch of exciting stuff on the horizon. We just made an announcement with a customer about a 20 kilowatt shipment that we've committed to. So we're getting there, but it's a very different challenge than the previous startups that I've been involved in. It's more fun. I will say that. Having a ton of demand and figuring out how to fulfill it is a lot more fun than the other way around.
A lot of kids dream about space technology, so I would hope you're having fun. Would you have some advice to share, maybe for those kids or the industry, or those considering getting into the industry?
So for me, I've always been fascinated by space, but I think a lot of people say that, especially people in the industry. You know, it starts young, and that's great. I had kind of reconnection with it more recently, really in my 40s, as I started to see my kids grow, and I was doing ad tech stuff, which is, it's interesting in an academic sense, and it does provide some value, but it's kind of soulless. And I wanted to do something that actually mattered. And so that was the connection point for space. It's cool, for sure, but I think it matters for humanity. If you look at a lot of the problems we have, whether it's political or economic or environmental, there's a zero-sumness to the thinking. And I can't imagine a better way for us as a species to kind of pull our eyes up, and I mean almost symbolically, to work together as humans of Earth on a challenge than getting stuff done in space. It makes it clear that there's so much potential for growth. We should not be looking down and fighting over what's here. We should be thinking about how to work together for growth. So that's why I'm excited. I didn't answer your question. Tying back to the question, I didn't come from a space background. So I had this epiphany 5, 6, 7 years ago. I started really working on this transition to space in 2016. So I guess that's 7 years ago now. I don't have a space background, but I do have useful skills that can be applied in service of this, space-focused mission. So I think the advice would be, use what you have. Think creatively about what value you can bring to a mission that's exciting to you, whether that's space or anything else, really. I think that's good advice.
Yeah, I love that. I think it goes to show that, everybody has different skills, but if you want to be a part of something, you don't have to know every part of being a part of it. Yeah. So this next part of the interview is really kind of a thought experiment to cast away any inhibitions, roadblocks, any hurdles that are standing in our way, to really think about what are the possibilities, or what would you like to see happen. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question is, what low-hanging fruit is out there that you would think of that people can bite into as an industry, as people, to make a difference in the world?
Space-focused or broadly? I'll focus it on space. I think there's tremendous potential stacked behind Starship. So as launch costs come down, this Starship is a heavy launch vehicle. It's SpaceX's next huge rocket that's will bring down launch costs by another order of magnitude, into the hundreds. That opens up a huge variety of applications that just aren't economically feasible today. So I'll take one, for example, is space-based solar power. So, we have a climate change issue that we need to address. One way to address that is, one of the problems with solar is clouds, night, things like that. Doesn't exist in orbit. You get high enough, you see the sun 24/7, solar radiation is 40% more intense. So it's a great environment for solar. The problem is how to get it to the ground, and launch costs and the materials costs to create the plant in space. When launch costs come down, the next barrier is solar. Solar in space has been tremendously expensive because it uses exotic materials, manual manufacturing techniques. It's just not really suited for scale. It's a Ferrari, and we need a Volkswagen. And honestly, that's what we're building. So large-scale, low-cost solar solution for space, but still robust to the environment and can last, an infrastructure scale, decades of service life in space.
It's really neat that something so sophisticated, space technology, is what you would consider to be low-hanging fruit. So I'm curious what you would consider some of the bigger challenges and opportunities. Maybe it has to do with space, maybe it has to do with Earth, but what would you think?
I'll go back to one of the themes that I said, this sort of zero-sumness. We got to figure out a way, as human beings, to work together. Whether it's, Democrats and Republicans or Europe versus Asia or whatever it is, like pick your sort of tribal boundary. We have to figure out a way to transcend that. I don't know if that's low-hanging fruit, but it's a very high leverage point, particularly in America. Like we're at a point where things are kind of binding up, and we need some leadership to start working together now.
Yeah, speaking of working together, this next question really is around that subject, what role do you see community playing in advancing a better world?
So I'll interpret community as government, because that's probably the most direct thing that gives me the most ideas right now. We've been very lucky to receive government support from a variety of different agencies. So NASA, NSF, Air Force, through the SBIR program, which has been super valuable in funding our early stage R&D. We're starting to weave in commercial revenue at this point, and that'll grow beyond the R&D spending from the government. But that government support in the early days is super important. Another area where government support can be equally important is in build out of manufacturing infrastructure. So things like the CHIPS program and the IRA, those programs that fund our industrial base here. There are some real sort of hard-nosed practical reasons why those are being funded. But the fact remains that those are super helpful in scaling up endeavors like ours at Solestial.
Absolutely, and actually that's why we're here through the City of Bakersfield. Public-private partnerships, as you described, really are an innovative way to make markets move, but also change people's lives and make the world a better place. And so appreciate your description of that and great example of what you guys are doing in that space. At the end of your career, or maybe the end of your life, or looking back, what would you like to see happen as a result of all of your efforts?
It's a big question. Hopefully I'm pretty far away from that point. I'll tie it back to, I mentioned that when I started really digging into space, the catalyst there was as my kids were starting to get to the point where they were paying attention to what Dad was doing at work every day. I'd like to leave something for my kids. I'd like to leave a legacy. I'd like to leave solar power plants in space. Again, we're serious about the mission, and whether those plants are powering infrastructure for human innovation in the cislunar environment, or whether they're beaming power back to Earth to mitigate carbon pollution, whatever it is, I think being fundamental in delivering a power infrastructure for space is, I think I'd be pretty satisfied looking back on that late in life. My grandkids looking up through a telescope, Dad built that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and powering the Earth, powering the future from space is really a grand vision, and these visions are grand, but, on the ground, there's a lot of struggles, a lot of, people are being left behind, and there's a lot of progress to make. Do you think that a just and equitable energy transition, so to speak, or transformation is possible? And if so, how?
Another big question, might be a little beyond my pay grade. The first thing that comes to mind there for equity for me equals education. I think there's a long way to go towards providing a level playing field from an educational perspective, and it's not really honestly a problem that I think about every day, but if I were tasked with solving that problem, that's where I'd focus first. I think there's lots of room for improvement in the education system.
Absolutely, and I agree, and that's really a big part of the dialogue that we've had so far is education. And speaking of education, thanks for sharing your thoughts and the vision for Solestial, but the community here. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for meeting up.
Absolutely, thanks for having me. It was fun.
So thank you all for joining in, and make sure to connect, collaborate, and create with Andy, and tune in next time. We'll see you soon.